Picture this. A self-made billionaire wakes up one morning and does something that would make most financial advisors cringe. He takes out a massive loan, not to pay off debt, not because he's in trouble, but to become even richer. Meanwhile, the average person hears the word debt and immediately thinks of one thing: danger. We've been taught our whole lives that debt is the enemy. But what if that's only half the story? What if the wealthiest people in the world know something about debt that schools never teach? And that difference is exactly why they stay wealthy. Today, a story about two investors. Both start with $30 million. Both get the same returns. But over a decade, one becomes dramatically wealthier. The difference? How they see debt. Most people assume the wealthy avoid taxes through shady loopholes. The truth is simpler and perfectly legal. They've learned to use debt not as a liability, but as a weapon to multiply what they have. Schools teach you to be an employee, to borrow for things that lose value, like cars and TVs. They never teach you to borrow for things that make you money. And that single omission is why so many people stay stuck. So, our two investors, let's call them Alex and Brianna. Both start the year with $30 million in the market, earning good returns. And both owe $3 million in taxes on their gains. Here's where their paths split. Alex does what we're all taught. He sells $3 million of his investments, pays the tax man, and moves on. Problem solved, right? But Brianna, she does something completely different. Brianna doesn't sell a single stock. Instead, she walks into a bank and gets a $3 million loan, using her $30 million portfolio as collateral. She pays her taxes with the bank's money. Now, here's the key. Her $30 million is still in the market, untouched, still growing, still compounding. Alex's portfolio is now $27 million. It's working with less. But the real magic is in the loan itself. The interest rate is fixed, locked in. And when you lock in a cost while inflation is running wild, you gain a massive hidden advantage. Here's the secret. Inflation works for you when you have fixed rate debt. Imagine you borrow at 5%. That cost is locked in forever. But as inflation rises, the dollars you use to pay back that loan become less valuable each year. You're repaying a loan with cheaper money. The wealthy use this principle constantly. It's called leverage. And it's a double-edged sword. If you borrow at 5% to buy an asset that grows by 15%, you've just made a fortune on someone else's money. But if that asset only makes 3% or loses value, you're paying the bank out of your own pocket. That's the fast track to bankruptcy. This isn't reckless gambling. It's calculated risk, used only when the numbers make sense and an asset produces enough cash to pay for itself. But the real strategy isn't just about paying taxes, it's about buying new assets. Imagine you own a building generating rental income. You see another one for sale, a better opportunity. Instead of selling your first building and paying huge taxes, you go to a bank. You use the cash flow from your first building as proof you can handle a new loan. The bank lends you the money, you buy the second building. Now you own two properties, both generating income, both appreciating, both building your empire, all while your original capital stayed put. For most people, debt is a burden to be eliminated. For the wealthy, it's a tool. They ask one simple question: does this new asset generate more money than this debt costs? If the answer is yes, they act. Think about the word debt. For most of us, it feels like a weight. Something dragging us down, chaining us to a job, a payment, a life we didn't quite choose. But what if I told you that for the wealthy, debt is the exact opposite? It's not a chain, it's a key. A tool they use to unlock and control assets they couldn't otherwise touch, to preserve capital that's already working for them, and to hedge against the slow, silent theft of inflation. This isn't about greed. It's about understanding how the system actually works. In an economy where your money is losing value every single day it sits still, the biggest risk isn't taking on strategic debt. The biggest risk is doing nothing. It's choosing to fall behind. The person who uses a loan to buy 3 rental properties is actively building wealth. The person with enough cash to buy one building outright but keeps it in a savings account, they're watching their purchasing power evaporate. That's the mindset shift. And it's the one thing schools will never teach you, because they were designed to create employees, not owners. Now, I need to make something crystal clear. I'm not telling you to go maxed out your credit cards. There's a universe of difference between the debt that traps you and the debt that frees you. Let's break it down. First, there's consumer debt. This is what most people know. You borrow money for a car. The second you drive it off the lot, it loses value. 5 years later, it's worth half what you paid for it, but you're still paying for it. That's bad debt. You borrowed money to buy a liability, something that takes money out of your pocket. Then there's asset debt. This is what the wealthy use. You borrow money to buy something that produces value. A rental property that generates cash flow. A business that creates profit. An asset that appreciates over time where the debt literally pays for itself. That's good debt. One makes you poorer, the other makes you richer. The distinction is that simple. But here's the trick. Here's where most people fall off the path. Using good debt requires absolute discipline. It means the money you borrow goes into an asset, and every single dollar that asset generates goes right back into the system. Buying more assets or paying down the principal. Not a new watch, not a vacation. This is where people fail. They see someone struggle with a loan and think, see, debt is dangerous. The difference wasn't the debt, it was the discipline. The wealthy also understand that debt creates momentum. It accelerates everything. Imagine you put down $100,000 to buy $1 million property. That property generates $100,000 a year in profit after all expenses and loan payments. You don't spend it, you save it. The next year, you use that profit combined with more leverage to buy another property. Now you have 2 properties generating $200,000 a year. Within a decade, that initial $100,000 you put in is now controlling tens of millions in assets. That is the explosive power of leverage combined with compounding. And here's the part nobody talks about. The wealthiest people in the world, many pay almost no income tax. Not illegally, they've just structured their lives so their wealth comes from asset appreciation, not a salary. Asset appreciation isn't taxed until you sell, so they never sell. Instead, they borrow against their assets to pay for their lifestyle. A loan isn't taxable income, it's just debt. Meanwhile, the average person works a job, gets taxed on their salary, invests what's left, and then gets taxed again on the returns. Their wealth is being extracted at every single step. So when you ask why the rich get richer, this is a huge part of the answer. It's not magic. It's understanding that in a world of constant inflation, cash is a liability, and debt, when used correctly, is one of the most powerful wealth-building tools ever created. Think about your cash in a savings account earning 1% while inflation runs at 3%. That money is losing 2% of its value every single year. You are being subjected to the debt of inflation without even realizing it. The question isn't whether you should ever borrow. The question is, are you borrowing to build or borrowing to consume? If this is starting to open your eyes to how differently money works on the other side, you need to keep going. Because understanding debt is just the first domino. Subscribe to this channel. We're going to keep breaking down the hidden systems that run the world. You just took the first step. Don't stop now.